It is another Friday, so it's time to answer some questions from the listeners.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15 or wherever you get your podcasts. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, we're on Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you are a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me and this show, well, I am based here in Kansas City, work over at Sports Radio 810 WHB, doing some hosting, co-hosting, and some producing as well. But when it comes to this podcast, when you click on this link, you know that you're going to be getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code all lowercase LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. And as always, with this being a Friday, it's completely dedicated to the listeners. And that just means if you are a first-time listener, send me questions that you have about the Royals. You can do that on YouTube. You can do that on Twitter. If I don't get to your question, just direct message me or try to repost it over there on YouTube so I can get to that question. I don't want any question to go unanswered by me because I open up, this outlet for listeners and fans to reach out and have burning questions about this team. I want to make sure that I can answer that question in a timely manner. But let's kick it off with question number one today. This comes from Colton. Who do you think we should move to our leadoff spot? Well, that seems like the big conundrum, right? For the majority of the second half, for the majority of the back half of the first half. I know that is kind of a weird term to use, but I think we all know what I'm going with there. Really, the only time the leadoff spot wasn't an issue was like the beginning part of April and then May. And then after that, the leadoff spot basically got no production, whether it was Maikel Garcia, it was Adam Frazier, it was Michael Massey. What it seems like right now is if there is a right-hander on the mound, it'll be Michael Massey leading off. If it is a left-hander on the mound, I think it'll be Maikel Garcia. That just is my gut feeling. I don't think there's going to be an everyday leadoff guy. I think it's going to be matchup-based. I'm a little disappointed that Matt Quatrero only gave Freddie Fermin 1 day to lead off, but Freddie's also been struggling now over the last 5 to 6 games or so. So, to me, I think it'll be Massey against right-handers, and I think it'll be Garcia against left-handers. That would be my plan of attack there as well, unless you wanted to give Freddie Fermin, another few chances at it. But to me, I think that's what the Royals are going to roll with, unless they change things back and go with somebody that hasn't gotten the leadoff spot yet this year. But good question. Next question comes from Bosnas. So is the bullpen fixed? I think that the bullpen is going to be what they kind of were all season long. And that is they're going to have their hot stretches, right? They're going to have their weeks of consistency, but they're also going to have their games in which they're blown. And that really can't happen over the final 45, 46 games. But it's just the reality of who's out there in the bullpen. I would love to throw Lucas Erceg every single night, but we know that's not going to happen, especially if he's working multiple innings. Now, the good thing is, last time out, when he worked an inning in 2/3, well, they had an off day right after that. And this Sunday, they're going to have another off day. Next Thursday, they're going to have an off day. So that gives your bullpen a really good chance to stay rested and stay productive. But to me, I still think there's a lot of guys out there you're just not going to be able to trust every single night. And that's kind of the case for all bullpens. There's going to be 2 or 3 guys you just don't trust out there. Right now, my circle of trust is Lucas Erceg. It's Will Smith and maybe Chris Bubich. I was about to say that's it, but I'll throw Chris Bubich in there. Those seem like the 3 that I feel good about. Sam Long, yes, but even then, Sam Long's had a couple of outings in which he's come in and he's given up a pair of runs, inherited runners, but just giving up those runs in general. Angel Serpa is not in that circle of trust. James McArthur's not in that circle of trust. Hunter Harvey right now is not in that circle of trust. So it's going to fluctuate a little bit. I think it's going to bounce back and forth with who I feel confident in, except for Lucas Erceg. But right now, that's what I have. I don't know if it's going to be fixed this year. I think it'll be heavily addressed in the offseason. But the good thing is they're going to have a lot of guys returning that I think are going to have bounce back years next year. I think you'll have Lucas Erceg as your closer next year. Hunter Harvey will be under another year of control. I think he'll have a bounce back year. I do think that John Schreiber will pitch, closer to what we saw in April, hopefully when he comes back. And you're going to have guys like Bubic and Serpa. There's a lot of guys that are going to be under control, but I still think they're going to go spend money to maybe bring in a bullpen arm or two that can really solidify the back end. Next question comes from Commissioner Gordon. What can we expect Caglione in Omaha, or when can we expect Caglione in Omaha and B in Kansas City? I think it's all going to come down to how these 10 to 15 games in Quad Cities go. If he goes down there and hits 400 against High A, they're going to bump him to Double A. And at that point, I think they'd keep him in Double A if he moved from, the Arizona League to High A to Double A. I think he'd finished out the year in Double A. Next year, it would not surprise me if he got a spring training invite. And if he goes in there and plays really well in spring training, though it doesn't mean a lot, they can have a better evaluation with, eyes right on him for a full month of where they can put him. And I've always believed that there can be more talent in Double A than Triple A. There's been guys that hit really well in Double A and they go straight to the big leagues. But I do think these next 5 to 10, I said 10 to 15, but 5 to 10 games in Quad Cities are going to tell us a lot. Because if he's hitting 280, they're not going to move him up past High A, I don't think, this year. Just because he had the workload of the college season. There's not much of a minor league season left. Maybe you don't want to push it. However, he could also hit 280 to 300, and they go, I'd like to see him get challenged in Double A. But as for Omaha, I wouldn't see it till next year. And for Kansas City, I wouldn't see it till late next year, assuming that he tears through the minor league level. So those are kind of my thoughts and takeaways on Jack Caglione. Supreme Ball Knower asks, is Erceg one of the ones? And I'm assuming with that, you mean, one of the guys that'll be in Kansas City for a long time and one of the better relievers that they've had. He's got the stuff. I mean, that pitch that he had to Wilyer Abreu on Wednesday night was arguably the most filthy pitch I've seen this year from anybody. And that includes Cole Reagan's changeup. That includes Walker's changeup, Seth Lugo's curveball. Even early on when James MacArthur had that sweeper that really had good bite to it, or, there hasn't been many bullpen guys with wipeout stuff. We all know that. But 100 miles an hour with two seams, sinker movement that started at Wilyer Abreu's hip and ended up in the middle part of the zone. That's the filthiest pitch I've seen in a huge spot, too. It wasn't like it was 8-0 and he threw that pitch. It was 3-2, 2 outs, and the Royals still were hanging on to a 4-run lead at the time. So I think Lucas Erceg has the stuff, too. The great thing about it is he doesn't have a lot of mileage on his arm, right? He was a position player for a number of years in the minor league level, just turned to being a pitcher. So it's not like he has a ton of wear and tear on his arm. So if he stays healthy, man, the stuff's there. The stuff is so lights out. So I think right now, though it's a very small sample size, I think he's going to be the best reliever next year. And assuming that he's still on the roster, which I think he will be the year after that, I'd imagine, unless somebody pops up or they go out there and sign somebody else, he'll be the best reliever again for the Royals. Next one comes from Decomposed Banana. Reasonable expectations for this team going forward. I know that a lot of you out there would want me to say, this is a playoff team. And I still think I'm going to stick with the gut feeling they will get in because of Boston's schedule the rest of the way and the Royals' schedule. Though the Royals do have tough opponents, on deck. They got to see Cleveland and Minnesota a handful of times. They have to see Houston a handful, or at least one more time. They got to see the Yankees and the Phillies. There's going to be very, very tough series for them. Boston has a lot of them as well. And I think that final wild card spot is going to come down to Kansas City and Boston. The expectation for me is that this comes down to the final week. That would be my initial reaction of, I think if it comes down to the final week, the Royals have anywhere from 86 to 88 wins. It'll be neck and neck. You'll be sweating it out all the way till the end of September. And in that final week, we're going to know if the Royals are going to make the playoffs or not. That may not be the answer you were looking for, but I do think this comes down to the final week. I don't see the Royals pulling away. I don't see Boston pulling away. I think it's going to be back and forth, for the final 45, 46 games or so. We're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, we got plenty of more questions to get into next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter, X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to a few of the sponsors, starting with Liquid IV. And if you're just like me, I need to stay on top of drinking water. I went through a certain phase of being able to drink tons of water every single day when I would go to the gym, when I'd be working out, or whether I would just be going into the office, and I wanted to make sure I got my water intake. I was fine back then. But from time to time, I find myself struggling to even have one bottle of water a day. I just get lazy about it, and sometimes water gets boring to me. But Liquid IV can spice things up, and it's really good for you. They have good taste. It keeps you hydrated, whether it could be a long night out for you. You go to a game, you wake up not feeling too great. Liquid IV can immediately rehydrate you. Or if you've gone to work out and you're exhausted when you come back, pop a Liquid IV in your water bottle, and it will really take care of any cramps or dehydration that you may have. So here's what you need to do. Go to liquidiv.com and use code MLB at checkout to get 20% off your first order. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration Today using code MLB at liquidiv.com. We also want to give a shout out to eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. An eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Let's jump right back into it and get to our next set of questions. This one comes from JHB 2006. Who is the closer? Is it still MacArthur or Ursig or somebody else? I know this is a unpopular opinion, but I just don't think that Lucas Ursig is going to be the closer, and no matter what, he is going to get the ninth inning. I think in a perfect world, we've said this before, he would get the ninth inning, but that would also assume that the high leverage spots were handled in the sixth, seventh, and eighth inning. If the starter only goes 5, or if they go 6, the seventh and eighth inning were handled by guys you may not trust as much. And I think the hope for Matt Quatrero is that if there's a high leverage spot in the 7th, you bring in Lucas Ursig, and then in the top of the 8th or the bottom of the 7th, the offense breaks through and you don't really have to sweat it out the rest of the way. Because the fear is you save Ursig for the 9th, but Will Smith or James MacArthur or John Schreiber, when he gets healthy again, or Hunter Harvey, they can't get it done in the 7th, the 8th, and then it doesn't matter who your closer is in the 9th because you've already relinquished the lead. I think in a situation where Lucas Ursig's being used more as the fireman than the closer, I think they will be building the 9th inning around, at this point, either Will Smith or Hunter Harvey, depending on matchups. Again, if those guys go earlier, it's a no-brainer. Lucas Ursig's the 9th inning guy. I do not believe James MacArthur is going to be closing out games anymore. I think Chris Bubich would have the shot over James MacArthur to close out games unless the bullpen was bare and James MacArthur was fresh and the other guys were not. But that's kind of where I'm at. I think there will be 4 options to close out games the rest of the way. I'll throw in 5 because of MacArthur. But Ursig, if they don't use him early on, Harvey and Will Smith, if they use Ursig earlier, Chris Bubich, I'll throw him into that conversation as well. And if those guys are burned out, it'll be James MacArthur because he has closing experience this year. I know people are going to like that, but that's the way a bullpen is going to work, is that if you are burned out, you go to the guy who does have at least a little bit of closing experience. Nate asked, should Garcia or DeYoung start at third base for the rest of the season? Yeah, this is going to be Maikel Garcia for me. I know that I'm a Maikel Garcia fan. I think he's been better since, the beginning of July? I think the beginning of July, he's had pretty good numbers. And I say pretty good numbers. Good numbers for Maikel Garcia, hitting around 260, 270, OBP in the 320s, right? Not hitting for a lot of power, but, that's what he was doing back in May. Just singles hitter, sometimes adding in an extra base hit or 2, good defense over at third. And that's the main reason for me. He's so good defensively, and Paul DeYoung is not. that I just want Paul DeJong to be the guy that plays, every other day. If you get Paul DeJong in there in 3 lineups a week, I think I'm all right with it. Because also Paul DeJong is not going to wow you, I think. We fell in love with what he did on the road trip when he joined the Royals, but since coming over to Kansas City, coming back over to Kansas City for a series at Kauffman Stadium, he's had some bad at-bats, right? And that's what he does. He strikes out a lot. He doesn't walk a lot. He does have power. That's what they wanted off the bench. And even Matt Quatrero, when they brought him over, kind of hinted at, he's going to be a good bench bat for us. JJ Picollo said the same thing. I don't think they're going to start DeJong over Garcia for the rest of the year. This one comes from Patrick. At what point do we need to solidify our leadoff hitter and 7, 8, and 9 inning bullpen guys as we're coming down the stretch? The issue is after the deadline, this is it, right? It's not so much about, finding guys to solidify the bullpen or solidify the leadoff spot. It's really just catching lightning in a bottle. I think for the Royals in their leadoff spot, Matt Quatrero is trying to get as creative as he can. We've seen Garcia. We've seen Massey. We've seen Frazier. We've seen Hanson. We've seen Fermin. We've seen Lofton, although Lofton's back down in Omaha. They're trying to get creative with that spot, and I'd imagine it's going to be completely matchup based, right? It's either going to be Massey against right-handers, Garcia against left-handers, just to give them an extra bat with the advantage at the top of the order. But I don't think it's going to be a spot that is completely solved this year. I think that this offseason, along with a bullpen arm or two, that is going to be one of the targets of the offseason, of going out there and getting a high OBP, somebody that can work the count guy for the leadoff spot. It wouldn't surprise me either if MJ Melendez gets a crack at it. He's done it before, and he's had some really good at-bats since coming off the injured list. So I would say they're trying to solidify it, but it's a dice roll at this point. It's up to those guys to give them the production. And as for the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning guys, kind of went over it a little bit of, it's going to be a streaky bullpen. I hate to say it, but this is who the bullpen's been all year long. Yes, you have a little bit of a boost in Lucas Erceg and Harvey when he's on. You'll get a little bit of a boost when John Schreiber's back, but it's going to be a streaky bullpen. They're either going to be on their game or they're going to blow a few games, and that's just the reality that we have with this group. This question comes from Walk a Season. What do you say personally to those who accuse the Royals of cheating and those who use Bobby Homan road splits against his MVP chances? Well, I think that the rest of baseball is certainly alarmed by the Royals going from 106 losses to, being in a wild card race. But I would say this, after the Astros cheating scandal, it is really, really difficult to find ways to cheat again. And if the Royals were cheating, doing it in basically the same way the Astros were, using technology, hacking pitch comms, all of that. Well, if you're able to hack pitch comms at home, I would say, why wouldn't you be able to hack them on the road? Right? That's just technology, and you find a way to sneak your way into the opposing clubhouse or something like that. Maybe it would be that you have attendants or clubhouse attendants working on stuff. I mean, it's all in good fun. I've never really taken it too seriously. If there are those out there that think it is real, I don't really have anything for you. I think when I've seen some of those tweets pop up or, somewhere on social media, I think they're kind of funny because I think at most part it is joking. But, I always say this in baseball because of the NFL and the NBA, when there's a bad team that turns things around, it's always embraced by that league. It's, this is a really cool story. The Lions going from where they were in the NFL to, getting to the NFC Championship game. Everybody embraced the Lions. Now, it took them a little bit of time. It took them a gap year where they didn't make the playoffs but improved, then made the playoffs, then made their run, of course. But to me, this is a lot different in baseball, that when a team is not good, there's not this sense of embracing. It's, they must be cheating. And that's from scar tissue of the Houston Astros. It's always going to be that way. But also when you look at the home run road splits for Bobby Witt Jr., you're going to see people use that against him because Aaron Judge, being a Yankee, and there's a lot of Yankees fans out there, you're going to try to find a way to nitpick the guy that's, running against Aaron Judge. But I think it's all in good fun. I think it's funny. I don't read in too much to it. I kind of just laugh when I see some of those elaborate ways to do it. And if they did have an elaborate way to do it, I'm not sure how they'd sneak it past the league unless they had, moles inside the league that were trying to find ways to hide all that evidence. And I just don't think the Royals would be one of those teams or know how to do a lot of that stuff. Let's do a last question here before we hit our final break. This one comes from Bob Witt Enjoyer. Obviously, we know the talent Mike Hill brings defensively. Do you think he can ever find that consistency from June with the bat If not, worth giving DeYoung more starts. Well, yeah, we just kind of talked about this. Not your fault. Nobody knows all the questions that everybody's asking. But I think Garcia at his age, what his upside can be, he's going to be the third baseman the rest of the way or play second base when DeYoung is playing. DeYoung was brought over here to be a bench bat, nothing more than that. He was not brought over to be a starter, and I think DeYoung not playing every day will give him a better chance to be productive. So I do think Garcia can find his form again. I mean, he had been hitting well since July 1st, so I think, his series against Boston was a little bit over-exaggerated. He had a few hits, and I think all three of the games, maybe game 2, he didn't have any hits. But I do think he's going to be fine in the long run. I think he's going to be that 260, 270 hitter with a 320 OBP and doesn't hit for much power. That's what I think he is. Maybe that's better suited for second base and you find more pop at third base, but that's probably a decision to be made in the offseason, not right now in the middle of a wild card race. Okay, before we move on to our final set of questions, we want to thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On MLB podcast. Host Pat Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, is here daily to provide national expertise with his trademark humor to help you get ready for the MLB playoffs here in the dog days of summer. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day on Locked On MLB. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. When we come back, we will wrap up our week with the final questions in this Mailbag Friday, next on Locked On Royals. You are tuning to Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can always find us on wherever you get your podcast, Monday through Friday. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and we are on YouTube. One last sponsor we want to give a shout out to in PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's also the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the PrizePicks community today. And you can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. And you can turn $10 into 1,000. If you're looking for promotions, PrizePicks has got you covered every week, from lowering select player stat projections on Tuesdays to helping your lineup hit or getting your entry fees back on Fridays. Download the PrizePick app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks for a deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It is that easy over at PrizePicks. All right, our last set of questions kicks it off with K-State for Life. What would your first playoff game starting lineup versus a right-handed pitcher be, and who gets the ball, Reagans or Lugo? It is going to be Reagans. I think they have treated him as the ace all season long, and I think you want to have that fallback of if you lose game 1, you would want to turn to somebody like Seth Lugo, somebody who's an experienced vet, had a great year, of course, but I think Reagans is going to be treated as the ace, and that would be their decision. And I think a rather easy decision if they are to make the playoffs and have that game 1 opportunity. Against the left-handed hitter, I think I'll stick consistent with the Michael Massey split thing where he'll face the righties, Garcia will face the lefties. So I'd go Massey, Bobby, Vinny, Salvi, probably go Renfroe or Melendez, depending how Melendez finishes out the last half of the season. So we'll go maybe Melendez in the 5-hole, Renfroe in the 6-hole just to give that righty-lefty-righty look. And then I'll go Freddie Fermin in the 7-hole. I will go Garcia in the 8-hole and then Kyle Isbell in the 9-hole. I think that would be my 1 through 9 for the Royals if they were to have a game 1 playoff matchup against a right-handed pitcher. Next one, it comes from Amo. Sorry if I got that wrong or mispronounced that. Do you think Bobby would be the runaway front runner for MVP if he was a Yankee? I don't think so. I mean, if he was a Yankee, he'd still be dealing with Aaron Judge and Juan Soto. But if you were to flip them, like if Aaron Judge wasn't with the Yankees, I think maybe to an extent. But also, I mean, Bobby Witt Jr.'s not being, voted against because of bias. I mean, Aaron Judge is having a Barry Bonds type year, it feels like, offensively, and not really, because you go look at some of the numbers that Barry Bonds had. But the closest thing since Barry Bonds, I think you can make a strong case for it. So Aaron Judge is having an incredible year. Like, I don't think it's the East Coast bias in there. I still think Bobby's going to make a really good run at it, but Aaron Judge offensively is ridiculous right now. Not offensively, and on the base path, Bobby Witt Jr. has him, beaten by a mile. But offensively, I mean, what we're seeing from Aaron Judge is ridiculous. And I think it's going to come down to the wire, but I'll stay kind of the same with what everybody's been saying. If Aaron Judge stays healthy, I really don't see a way in which he doesn't win the MVP. But if Bobby was a Yankee, thank God we'll hopefully never have to see that sight. I don't think that he would be the runaway because it also depends on who was right behind him. I mean, if it was Gunnar Henderson, then yeah, he would be a runaway, MVP winner because Gunner's really not that close to Bobby right now anymore. But if it was Aaron Judge somewhere else, I think we'd be running into the same type of a battle right there between Judge and Bobby Witt Jr. This one comes from MIZ123Fan16. What does our team need to improve the most on for a true playoff run? I believe we are a playoff team, but I'm unsure with how our flaws will show in the playoff series. Thanks as always. Pretty simple for me. You got to solidify that bullpen. If that bullpen can catch fire in the last half of the season, that is going to be the difference. That's how the 2014 Royals were able to make a run. It's how the 15 Royals were able to make a run, along with having, their comeback abilities offensively. But with this team, man, if they can lock things down in the final 3 innings, the final 9 outs of the game, that is going to be the difference in a first-round exit and maybe getting as far as the championship series. Chief Fly Royal asks, how is Marsh doing in Omaha, and do you see him being brought up again soon? I remember the last time I checked in on Marsh, he had just come off a 3-inning outing. It was scoreless. He looked very good. And I just look at Alec Marsh as somebody that should go down there and pitch really well in AAA. So I don't think there's going to be that problem, even if he does have a bad outing or two where he can't recover, right? He can't, find that level of consistency again. He can't find that strikeout pitch again, the sweeper, the curveball, the 95 to 96 mile an hour fastball. But the last time I checked in, he had a pretty good outing down in Omaha. And now looking at his numbers, back-to-back scoreless outings, he has 7 scoreless innings, 10 Ks, only 2 walks, not allowing any base runners, basically a whip that is just around 0.5. So, yeah, I'd imagine we're going to see Alec Marsh come back up in September and hopefully a secret weapon for the Royals as they make their final playoff push. This one comes from JC Retro Athletics. What team would you not want to draw round 1 in the playoffs? This is going to sound weird, but I said this in the crossover episode. I don't want to draw Houston. I think I would take anybody. I think the Royals would have no pressure on them no matter who their opponent was, but Houston wouldn't really have that much pressure either. They would have been kind of this underdog that snuck back in. They've got the postseason experience, and I hate playing in that ballpark. I'd love to draw the Yankees or the Orioles because all the pressure in the world is on them. I'd like to draw Seattle because of the matchup and how their offense is. I know it wouldn't be Minnesota. It'd be impossible to get Minnesota because they're in the Central. But of the Yankees, the Orioles, the Mariners, and the Astros, I wouldn't want to see the Astros. They're just a team that reaches a different level once they get to the postseason. So, yeah, that would be my team I'd want to avoid. Alex asked, how loud do you expect the cheers to be for Walk on Saturday night as he faces his former team? I think he'll get a pretty good, round of applause there. It depends on how game 1 goes. Maybe Cardinals fans won't be as nice or kind to Walker, but I do think they love Michael Walker, and the Royals obviously love Michael Walker. So I'd imagine with as big as the crowds are going to be this weekend, he'll get a pretty nice, round of applause and ovation when he's announced the starting lineup on Saturday night. Charles asked, if we get in the playoffs by winning the division, are your expectations for what we do in them any higher than if we get the wild card? I would say no, because if they do win the division and they get that bye and they're in the American League Divisional Series, still winning a best of 5 is going to be really tough against anybody. If they get in the wild card round, kind of the same thing. It's going to be tough to win a best of 3. It's for me all year. It's been about you get your foot in the door and you roll the dice. If it doesn't work out, you still got into the postseason. I know that's not a very confident approach, but I'm just not going to be disappointed if they lose in the wild card series or lose in the divisional round. Just because I think there's a lot of great teams in the American League and the Royals are far ahead of schedule. But yeah, if they do get to the LDS, that's one step further. So if you win game 1 of that series, well, I'm kind of expecting you to win that series at that point in time because, you grabbed the first one and the history would tell you that a lot of times when you grab game 1 of the ALDS, you're going to fare just fine. RB Carr asks, where does Vinny rank among first basemen and what would an extension look like? Would 6 for 96 get it done? I think 6 for 96 probably would get it done. That's a lot of years. I don't know if I'd go that many with Vinny. I think I would try to go 4. And I think anywhere from like 4 for 70 to 75, I think would get it done. Maybe a little bit less than that, just because he's had one full year of production at this level. And I think he truly loves it in Kansas City. And where he ranks among first basemen, I think I would put him at this point top 12 in all of baseball because of his recent hot stretch. So I feel pretty good about him being in the top half of first basemen in all of Major League Baseball. Aiden asks, if the Royals were to give Cole Reagans an extension, how much do you think it would cost per year to get that done? I think that it would cost anywhere from 20 to 25 million per year. So if you're looking at a 4 or 5 year deal, I mean, like a 5 year, 100 million, that could be something you go for there where, you're really rewarding him for what he was able to do. Although I said 5 for 25, maybe 4 for 100. That's what I should have said. Yeah, not 5 for 25 per year would put that over 100 million. So maybe the 4 year for 100 million. Since he's young, you could give him a little bit extra, right? Get that 5th or that 6th year. You could always add in a player option or something like that. But I think in the ballpark of 20 to 25 million would make a lot of sense for Cole Reagans. Next one comes from Jeff. It's always important to win a series. In the 3-game series against the Twins, is it almost a do or die series to have hopes of getting the 2 seed? What best outcome for the Royals and the Guardians Twins? 4-game series, I'm thinking 2 of 2. Again, I just never use do or die unless it's a playoff game and the loss will end your season, or you have to win the final game of the year to get into the playoffs. But I do think to get the 2 seed, you have to find a way to split. You have to find a way to take one of those series against Minnesota just to keep pace. As long as you keep pace, you're still going to have an opportunity, but they can't go in there and get swept by any of those teams the rest of the way because that could bury them and their chances of winning the division or grabbing that 2 seed. Matt asks, what do you think that Matt Quatrero is so insistent on using Harvey as the closer instead of Erceg? It's pretty clear that while Harvey has excellent stuff, that Erceg is the best reliever on the team. Let Harvey and Bubic handle the 8th and let Erceg go the 9th. Again, I just think they view Erceg as the fireman guy. Like, Erceg is far better than Harvey and Bubic, and if the highest leverage spot is in the 7th inning, they're going to Erceg, and they're going to figure out the 9th inning a little bit later. If they don't have to sweat through a high leverage spot in the 7th or the 8th inning, it's a 3-run game or a 2-run game, well, then, yeah, I think they would try to build their bullpen around Lucas Erceg. But his role is always going to be up in the air, depending on what happens in those final 3 innings. And lastly, Brett asks, besides Erceg, Long, and Bubic, who do you trust in the bullpen? I forgot to add Sam Long in my circle of trust, so I will do that, even though he's had his shakiness. I'll add Will Smith to that group, and that might be it for me. I think Erceg, Long, Bubic, and Will Smith would be the only ones. Schreiber's going to have to earn it coming off of the injured list, and Hunter Harvey's going to have to earn it again after a couple of bad outings in save situations for the Royals. So that's where I got right now, about 4 guys in the bullpen that are in my circle of trust. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter, X at JohnnyJ_15. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On MLB podcast. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day. You can find the link to Locked On MLB in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, we will talk to you on Monday after this quick 2-game series with the Cardinals. We'll have a full breakdown of it then. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.